Let's make history.
Most people who live in cities along the East Coast, they are familiar with the term Boricua. Puerto Ricans, we call ourselves Boricua. Whether you live in Florida, Orlando area, cities, various cities throughout Pennsylvania and Connecticut, and of course New York City, Boston, Chicago, even. People are familiar with this term. Where does it come from? The natives of the island, the Taino Indians, that's what they called the island. Way before it was called Puerto Rico, the natives called it Borinquen. So that's why Puerto Ricans, we call ourselves Boricua, to establish and continue that connection that we have with the Taino Indians, the pioneers of the actual land there on the island. However, we're the only ones who do this. So other Latin American countries have native names as well, not all. For instance, Dominican Republic, the natives call Quisqueya. Actually, they had two names, and there's a reason for that. I'm gonna get into that in a second. It was called Quisqueya, and it was also called Haiti. And that's where the word Haiti comes from. So they divided the island in Hispaniola, they renamed it, divided in half, called one half Haiti, called one half Dominican Republic, but it was Quisqueya. Cuba's original name was Cubanacan, which is where the word Cuba comes from, or the name, where the name Cuba comes from. Basically a shortened version of Cubanacan. Mexico, that was part of the original name that the natives gave it. It was called Mexico Tenochtitlan. And of course, it was shortened to Mexico. So the reason why, and it means navel of the moon, like the belly button of the moon. Fascinating stuff. The Aztecs gave it this name. But then, see the whole thing with Latin American countries, most of them are actually named after the original name. They just altered it, anglicized it a bit, changed the spelling, like Guatemala, like Honduras, Nicaragua. All of those were like pretty much native names. But the thing is, you gotta remember, and this is not just the case with Latin America, this is also the case in Africa as well. Like, Africans didn't have a name for the entire continent. That was something that the Europeans did. When civilization, they got the ball rolling on civilization, and as far as geography and things, and they classified the different continents. But this is something fairly new. This wasn't done before. It was more so done by region. So in Latin America, aside for the examples I just gave, there's not really, no one really ever named the entire area. And also, in these places, you had several indigenous tribes. It wasn't just one. Now, in Puerto Rico, there was the Taino Indians. But in the other various areas of Latin America, you had several indigenous groups. And they would call their little area one thing. It wasn't the whole, what today is the whole country. It was just their little section. But take Venezuela, for instance. That's the name the natives gave it for the most part. Now, Bolivia was named after Simón Bolívar, who was a Latin American freedom fighter out of Venezuela. And he was the one who liberated many of those countries on the west coast of South America, which at one point they were all one country called Gran Colombia. It was like 7 countries. Panama, Ecuador, Peru, etc. Check out my video on that, definitely, where I go into detail on Simón Bolívar, his history, and how these countries broke off and formed their own units. And actually, Peru and Ecuador is an exception because that was also like one region, the Inca Empire. And the natives call it Tawantinsuyu. That was the region, the Inca Empire, the region from Peru going all the way north to Ecuador. Same thing with Argentina and Chile. They didn't have one name. Those were sectioned off to be the countries they are today much later.